Awesome. So welcome everyone. This is our final mechanics session. Today we'll be focusing on our chains and drivetrain maintenance. My name is Adie Filson. I am the Mobility Education Coordinator with the City of Cambridge and the Community Development Department. You can check our bike workshops schedule online at cambridgema.gov/bike workshops. So, let's see. Cool. And as I begin, if you have questions, feel free to ask them in the Q&A section. I'll take pauses intermittently to check, and yeah, I'm here as a resource for any of you. So if there's anything you don't understand or like clarification on, or have any sort of like weird problems you think are related to your chain and drivetrain, I'm more than happy to address them. So with that, bring this over. Cool. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is chain maintenance. So if you recall from the ABC quick check, for anyone that has been following along through this maintenance session, the maintenance series, the last part of the ABC quick check is a chain. A being checking the brakes, air being checking the tires, giving them a squeeze, making sure there's air. B being brakes, making sure your brakes are functioning and checking them separately. And chain, making sure that your chain is on and that it's functioning properly. So usually I'll just give it like a quick spin and just a visual check. Ooh, wow, making sure there's not debris in your chain. So when I'm checking my chain visually, I want to make sure obviously that it's not rusty. You can see, let's see if my demo idea works. So if you can see here, my chain isn't rusty, but it's kind of gunky. And it does look wet. So this is a scenario in which maybe I don't need to oil my chain. It already looks kind of like well oiled. It just has like accumulated a lot of dirt and debris along the way. So what I need for that, actually I have a piece of, so you can see this is like a like semi-rusty chain. It's a little more subtle, but you can tell that it looks kind of like, it's not shiny, it's just kind of flat in appearance, and it's very like dry, and if I'm playing around with it, you can see it's really stiff. Keeping your chain oiled and lubricated is really, really important, because all of these bits on the chain, you can see, if you look how this is connected, it's bits of metal that fit inside each other. And so you have like an outer link, let's see, you can see that, it's sort of this outer link and then an inner link, and it's made up of those interlocking links with this pin in between. And that's what allows it to rotate. But that also means that there's a lot of different rotation points where there's metal rubbing on metal. And when you buy a new chain, your chains will come pre-lubricated, that will you'll notice that it'll be like kind of sticky and goopy, but that lubrication stays in the chain for quite a while. And even after like the outside wears off, what's really important is that the inside of all of those pins and stuff are lubricated. And the lubrication serves as a barrier between the pieces of metal. So basically, you know, imagine that you put lotion on your hands and rub them together. That lotion, it's the lotion that is serving as an interface between your two hands. And that's the same thing as chain lubricant. It prevents the metal pieces from actually rubbing on themselves and wearing down. And something that's really cool actually is if you take a cloth and wipe down your chain after you've been riding it for a while, especially if you've been riding it when it hasn't been lubricated, and then you take a magnet and hold it up to that cloth, you'll actually pick up little shards of metal from the cloth that are pieces of your chain. So over time, that chain wear, those little bits of metal coming off, mean that there's more room between these little pins and stuff, so that your chain actually stretches. It has the effect of stretching your chain. And when your chain stretches, it no longer interfaces with the chain rings and the cassette properly. So you can imagine the chain sits on top of a chain ring like this, and instead of sitting on these sort of more flat parts here, it starts to sharpen. It starts to sit more and more on the sides, and it starts to actually sharpen these teeth. These pointy things are the teeth, and to the point where it can look like this. And I'll hold these up in comparison so you can see how this wore over time. Actually, I should probably do it this way. So you can see where the teeth wear down over time, so that they become really sharp. And this is just dangerous in general. Obviously, if you like hit your calf with this, this would probably hurt pretty badly and scrape you up. But also what it means is that if you're shifting gears, your chain is no longer sort of like sitting, there's more like wiggle room between the chain and the chain rings. And so when you're shifting gears, a lot of times you'll notice like a skipping, or your chain won't really behave. You won't be able to like shift as smoothly. And yeah, you'll experience some like chain jumping. It might be that you're like stuck, you get like stuck between a couple gears when you're shifting. And yeah, at that point when you've gotten to be this bad, this is really, really bad, you have to replace your chain rings and your cassette. However, oiling your chain can preserve your drivetrain, your entire drivetrain, so your cassette here and your chain rings here, such that like you might never have to change them, or not for years at least. If you don't take very good care of your chain, then you at some point will probably have to replace your cassette and your chain rings, and that is a pretty expensive, those are pretty expensive parts to replace. A rear cassette can be as little, I don't know, anywhere from like $30 to upwards of $100, depending on what kind of bike you have and how nice your components are. So keeping your chain oiled. Another thing is noting when your chain is stretching, because it's really that chain stretch that causes the teeth to wear down so that they get to that sharp point, which we call sharp toothing. It's easier to see on the front chain rings that this cog here is a front chain ring, but your back cassette will also wear. It's a lot harder to spot visually, but the best thing to do is before you get to that point, even if you haven't been doing a great job of taking care of your chain, is measuring your chain stretch and keeping an eye on your chain stretch. And we have this fun little tool here that is used for measuring your chain stretch. And you'll see that it has numbers here. This is 0.75, and then this side is 0.5. Sometimes these come as also 1 will be another measurement. Anytime you are 0.5 and lower, you are in the clear. If you're between 0.5 and 0.75, it's not like immediately necessary to change your chain, but it's around the time when you would start to think about changing the chain. And when you're over 0.75, or that's what 1 would show as well, sometimes these will be like 0.75 and 1 will be the other measurement, then you have really passed the point of being able to save this chain. And at that point, you'd want to completely replace your chain and unfortunately probably your drivetrain components. And you can think about it as the reason why we would want to change not just our chain at that point, but our drivetrain components is your chain will wear with your drivetrain components, kind of in the same way as you can think about like your foot wears into a shoe. And imagine, you know, if you take that shoe and give it to someone else and they put it on, it no longer will fit together. In the same way that if you just buy a new chain and put it on, it won't fit with the wear that the cassette will have. So that's why when you get to 0.75 or above, that you'll want to replace also the cassette. So in that sense, how you would see that is that there'd be no way that you could adjust your derailleur such that when you were shifting gears in the back, that you'd be able to avoid that sort of like skipping and getting stuck between gears and that lack of smoothness. And you might not notice it all the time, but it would be present. And but yeah, so if you start noticing, even if your derailleurs, your derailleur here and here are properly adjusted, that you'd still have that kind of like skipping between gears, probably has to do with your chain wear or your chain wearing over time if you've replaced your chain and not your drivetrain components, that as well. So how do you use this? You notice that there's a hook side and then this straight side. So the hook side actually goes into your chain and hooks on. And what you're trying to do is then see if this bit drops in to your chain as well. So I don't think I've ever measured this chain, so we'll see. Let's see if, actually, take my demo camera. So this is you can see, drop it in, hook it in, it's sitting in there. And then this side here is at, let's see if you can see. Well, it's a little hard. 0.5. So the bottom part here is at 0.5. So right now I'm checking to see if it's at 0.5. It's not slipping in here. So that's a good sign. That means it's not 0.5. So this chain is in great condition. and is relatively new. If this dropped in to 0.5, then I would want to switch this around and look at the 0.75 side and see if that fits in. And if it didn't fit in, then I would know it was between 0.5 and 0.75. And if it does slip in, I know it's at 0.75 or higher. So one of these tools is really great to have on hand. Put down my demo camera. So that's how you know your chain is stretched or not. Question, do you check multiple parts of the chain? That is a really good point. Yes, it is ideal if you're measuring your chain stretch. I would measure multiple points of the chain, especially because your chain might not necessarily stretch evenly in all places. And because the top of the chain here is held with a bit more tension than the bottom of the chain. So it is really good practice to check chain stretch in multiple places. So if I want to do that here, no, that still seems okay. But very good point. That is the best practice, to check your chain in multiple places. And usually what I would do is just check it on the top and the bottom if I were to check it in multiple places. Cool. So yeah, so this just sits on top of your chain like this. You fill it with, you'd already have soapy water in here. You'd lock it on, and this thing just kind of goes up and down. You can scrub. So some people like these. This is good, I guess, if your chain is like really, really filthy and gritty and dirty. The thing is, a lot of people will recommend against this other train of thought is that a lot of people will recommend against using any sort of like soap and water on your chain as much as possible, because even if you're re-lubricating your chain, it's really, really hard to get all of the little bits and pieces lubricated, especially after you've stripped it of the initial sort of lubrication that your chain comes with, which is why you'll notice if you buy a new chain, it's just, they're really gunky and sticky. But yeah, it's so that level of lubrication on the inside, like I mentioned before, is preserved. So that's why I tend to steer away from using these. Some people use them, I guess it's maybe better than having a really like dirty chain. I really like using, if I need to get down into the little bits and pieces here to clean them, what I like to use is a toothbrush. So I save all of my old toothbrushes and use those. There's also brushes that you can get, and there's this too. This is also used for cleaning the cassette. In general, you should try and keep your chain as clean as possible. But the way that I clean my chain is, if it gets really, really dirty, you can actually just use some stuff like, so T9, this stuff is amazing. I really love this. It's sort of like WD-40, but specifically for bikes, and I think it's a little less harsh, but it's a metal protectant and lubricant. And you can actually clean your chain to some degree with lubricant. So especially if you have accumulated stuff over time and it's not coming off with just your regular cleaning practices, using a lubricant to clean your chain can help sort of like get some of the extra stuck stuff off. But in general, all I use is a cloth. And when you're cleaning your chain, you want to make sure that you're not using paper towels or anything linty. So, you know, just save some old rags, old t-shirts. And what you do is you put your chain, you put the cloth flat in your hand like this, on the palm of your hand. I'm gonna switch hands so this is easier. And loop my hand around, and I'm focusing, I'm gonna clamp on here, and I'm gonna focus the pressure on the top and the bottom, even though it's like the sides that might appear a little bit more dirty. It's the top and bottom that are interfacing with your chain rings. So, and the teeth in general. So the most important thing is the top and the bottom. So I'm gonna focus most of my, but in general, I'll kind of like curl my hand around it. And you don't wanna clamp so hard onto this that the chain can't move freely. You want the chain to glide through your hand. Hold on, I think this is cool. And then I'm gonna back pedal through my hand. I'm gonna do it down here. It seems like this is between gears. There we go. And so I'm just gonna back pedal through my hand, and it's gonna leave, my chain's really dirty right now, so it's gonna leave these like streaks on the cloth. And every so often, you're gonna want to shift to a new part of the cloth and pedal through again. Still leaving streaks. And I'm just gonna keep doing that until it's not leaving that much gunk anymore. If it seems like there's still a bunch of stuff stuck on here, at that point is when I would want to this is dirty enough that like maybe I would take some T9 and spray it down with that. But yeah. And like I mentioned before, my chain doesn't look very dry. It just looks like it's accumulated a lot of stuff. I once spoke to someone who worked at a bike shop who thought that that people tend to over lubricate their chain rather than under lubricate their chains. And the issue with over lubricating your chain, and we'll talk about this again in a second, is that I'm gonna go back to my hands analogy and hands and lotion analogy. If you put a bunch of lotion on your hands and you have all sorts of excess lotion on your hands, and then you go outside in the world and you like touch something dirty, it's immediately gonna pick up any sort of grit and grime and dirt, and you're just gonna be like a dust and dirt magnet. You know, imagine sticking your hands into dirt with lotion all over them. It's just gonna stick all over. And then after that, you're riding with like lots of grit and grime on your chain, and it's gonna start to wear down your chain and your drivetrain. So that's the danger of over lubricating your chain. Definitely always give your chain a quick wipe down, especially after you've been riding in any sort of wetness, because the wetness will start to strip away the lubrication. But yeah, always give it a wipe down first, and then kind of check and see, you know, does your chain look still pretty like moist, like it has some inherent lubrication or not. The other thing is, when in doubt, you know, I'd probably still lubricate my chain and just make sure I wipe it down after really well to remove any sort of excess that's on the outside. That said, in terms of lubricant, always use bike-specific lubricant and do not use WD-40. WD-40 will, and T9 in and of itself will, even though they have like a lubricating property to it, it'll make your chain kind of like waxy and slippery. There's a bunch of different types of lubricants. I like Pedro's lubricants. There's Sin Lube, this green one, and then Chain J. These are both really great. You'll notice this Sin Lube is Performance Wet Lube, and Change A is a light wet lube. So basically this is just a higher viscosity, which means that it'll stick to your chain better, but it also will pick up some dirt and grime a little more than this one will. This one you'll definitely, if I use this, I'll have to lubricate my chain more. Basically just personal preference. There's also dry lube. I don't really think that I recommend dry lube. You know, it's stuff that you'd want to use in like a dry environment. It won't keep your chain as lubricated as well. Make sure my demo camera, is still, well, we may have lost the demo camera, but. So any case, if you don't want a Pedro's lubricant, Tri-Flow is also really great. This is, any of these lighter lubes too, like Change A, Tri-Flow is a little on the lighter side, can also be used additionally to help keep your cables. If you look at any of the entry points where your cables go into your housing, you can kind of rehydrate those if they get corroded over time with these lubricants. You just pour a little bit in. It's nice to have some of the lighter lubricants around as well. So after I've wiped down my chain all the way, and given it that initial cleaning, what I want to do is I want to put a drop of lubricant on every chain joint. So since I'm lost my demo camera, so each one of these joints, that's where I'll focus. I'll put a little dab on each one. And I want to keep track of which chain links I've oiled already and which ones I still have to go. And I do that by, I'll start here and I'll oil all the way around here, and then I'll follow this chain link. Or actually, if I backpedal, it'd be the other way. So maybe I'd start here in that case and go this way. So I keep track of this to here, and I know it's now there, and then I can oil this next stretch. And that way, and I'll keep going around like that until I've gone all the way around once. If you have a master link on your chain, I don't believe I do. But basically, sometimes there's like one link that's different than all of the rest that's used, that's like the final link that you put on as a connector. And it will have a little bit of a gap. It'll be where the pin is, that allows it to latch in. So you can use that as a way of keeping, you can always start with the master link and keep track of it that way. Cool. Yeah, so I put a drop here. And when I'm starting out at this, maybe I just do like a little dab. You can see it's just a tiny bit. And since I'm pretty experienced at this, I'd probably just kind of drag this along very gently, because I'm able to like moderate how much is coming out, and then spin it around. And this isn't, I'm not squeezing this enough that it's like dripping through the gaps. So I'm really keeping track of like how hard I'm squeezing this. And so I would just go around all the way like that. Some people like to let their chain sit with the lubricant on it for a couple minutes so the lubricant gets into all of the nooks and crannies. I would especially do that if your chain is particularly dry. If it just seems like it needs a little bit of a cleaning, or it's in generally good shape, I probably wouldn't need to do that. So at that point, what I would do is exactly what we were talking about before with the lotion in the hands. I don't want to just leave my chain like this and start riding, because I will any sort of like excess on the outside is going to pick up dust and grit from the road. So I actually give it another wipe down after I've oiled it to get any excess off. And for that, same thing as cleaning it, make sure you pick a clean part of your cloth. Don't use a part that you use to clean your chain, and clamp down. And I'll just maybe do just a couple rotations. And sometimes you'll notice, I didn't properly clean this chain, so it's still leaving streaks, but you'll notice that it might start to break down some extra dirt and gunk that's on there. So you might start to see some more dirt marks on your cloth. Totally fine. Yeah, so just a couple more rotations to wipe off the excess. Another thing that you can do is take a cloth, and these pulleys here, these pulley wheels, this part of your derailleur is called the pulley. And these pulley wheels can accumulate quite a bit of dirt. So another thing that I'll do every once in a while is I'll focus my fingers on either side of that pulley wheel, and I'll just clean off that pulley wheel. And you'll notice it's just like so much gunk on there. Cool. So that's the basics of chain maintenance. The next thing that we're going to talk about is how to properly adjust our derailleurs so that our shifting is smooth. So like I mentioned before, this is your rear derailleur here. It's this whole contraption. You'll see it has like a springiness to it. And then this here, I like to say it's kind of the shape of an eyebrow, is your front derailleur. And so when I'm using my shifters, you'll notice that this is what moves, and it's this derailleur is basically moving or guiding the chain between each of these cogs. Derailleurs are controlled through cable tension, and properly adjusting a derailleur mostly has to do with controlling the cable tension. So we want to make sure that this cable is not too tight and it's not too loose. That said, we want to make sure that our derailleur, especially in the rear, can reach this whole range of gears. And in order to do that, we want to make sure that our limit screws are properly set. So our limit screws are what set the limits of the movement of the derailleur. So they'll set like how far left it can go versus how far right it can go. And it's really important that those are properly set, because if they're not, then either you won't be able to reach the smallest or largest cog, or if your limits are too wide, your chain can come off either over this way or into your wheel. And if it comes off the outside, it's not as big of a deal. Obviously, it's not a good thing, but if your chain comes off into your wheel, it's really dangerous. So there's some tests that we can do to make sure that that doesn't happen. We do this by what we call overshifting. So we want to basically stress the shifting system to see if we can force it over like into the wheel. And we do that, I'll shift all the way to my largest gear in the back. And once it's there, what I'm gonna do is take my thumb and press it here. Oops. Let's see if we can see. Right here. And I have my finger here. And I'm pressing it to see if I can get it to move into my wheel anymore. And this is a little tough because I actually have this chain, this guard, this plastic guard right here helps prevent the chain from slipping off into the wheel. A lot of older bikes will have this. I don't think as many newer bikes do, but so I force overshift by seeing if I can push my derailleur any further into my spokes. And then I pedal and it's staying on. It's not falling into my spokes. So that high limit is probably okay. Oh, what else is I gonna say about that one? But also the, obviously I can reach this top gear. So I know that my limit screws aren't set too far in either, so that I can't, so that my derailleur can still reach that. And we'll do the same for the highest gear, which is in the back is the smallest cog. And I'll do that. So when I'm moving up my cassette towards the larger gears, I'm using tension to move the chain up. And when I'm moving down, I'm losing tension. So it's the force of gravity that's helping my chain. My chain falls back down to the smallest. So, so it's this motion, the derailleur is moving outwards this way. So instead of pushing on it like this, to test that, to force overshift, I'm going to pull on it when I reach my smallest gear. And, you know, make sure that you are checking the range, when you're pushing or pulling on your derailleur, make sure that you're checking sort of like what the natural movement of the derailleur is. You don't want to like be forcing it in a direction accidentally that it doesn't actually move in. So same thing here. I'm pulling on my derailleur and I'm gonna pedal and see if my chain falls off outwardly, and no, it does not. Okay, cool. Another thing about limit screws is that they help your chain, they help align the derailleur under the cogs. So let's see if we can see this. So this, your chain and your pulleys should all be lined up. And tightening or loosening these limit screws are one way that produce that alignment. The other way is this barrel adjuster here. I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but before we get to that derailleur, that barrel adjuster bit, I'm gonna show you a quick diagram so that this is a little easier to understand. Share. Okay. Why is the sharing? One moment. Okay, cool. So this H and L here are for high and low. And what you'll see here is that oftentimes it will be labeled on your rear derailleur, this H and L. And the H for high is your smallest cog in the back, and your low is your largest cog. So you can see that here. This is not the same case for your front. It's actually reversed, where your high gear is your largest and your low gear is your smallest in the front. And you can remember it that the gears closest to your frame are your lowest gears, and your gears all the way out as far as you can away from the frame are your high gears. But you'll notice in the front, your chainring that's the farthest out from your bike is your largest one, whereas in the back, it's the smallest one. So that's an easy way to remember. Your lowest one is towards the frame, and highest is furthest out from the frame, both in the front and the back. In this case, we're just gonna talk about the back for right now. So anytime you are tightening a limit screw, you're going to be moving it in on either side towards the cassette. So tightening is towards the cassette and loosening is away from the cassette. And you'll see that here with these arrows. So left loose, you're moving away from the cassette, and right tight, you're moving towards the cassette. So tight towards, with the cassette being the center of reference. So I'm gonna wanna use a screwdriver if I'm ever playing around with my limit screws. In general, limit screws are not something that you have to adjust. Usually once your limit screws are adjusted once, unless someone messes around with them, they pretty much can stay as they are. So this is an adjustment that you'll be doing that often. But since I'm on my highest gear right now, so I want to find this little H, and I'm gonna stop sharing. So these are my two limit screws here. I don't think you can really see it, but there's a high and there's an H and an L. If you want to see actually what a limit screw does, let's see if we can pull this off. These are on your front derailleur, these are your limit screws. You can see from the top. I unfortunately don't think this is gonna work, but it's usually easier to see on the front derailleur than the back one. But you can actually look through and follow the limit screws here to see, and you'll be able to see them hitting a piece of the derailleur in here. And that's basically what the limit screws do. So you can kind of, if you forget which one's high and which one's low, you can look and see which limit screw is engaged in what position, and that's the one that you'll want to be adjusting. And sometimes you can over tighten your cable tension such that neither limit screw is engaged. And that's a sign that your cable tension is too tight. And that will more so be on the front. On the back, your limit screws only work on the, will mostly be controlling just the high and the low. So if you're in a middle position, you wouldn't see your limit screws engaged. Cool. I don't know if this is an adjustment that you'll be able to see or not. When I'm checking limit screws, basically I want to look for this alignment by standing directly behind the wheel and looking in this way and that angle. It's going to be really hard to see this, but you know, we'll give it a shot. So I'm at my highest one. So I'm going to loosen this. And let's see, I actually might be able to just force shift this off now. And you'll see actually that now I can force shift the chain off of that cog. Oh, which would be kind of pretty dangerous. So it's catching there because it's catching between this highest cog and my dropout here. So let's see if I can get this back. Cool. All right, so I'm just gonna quickly tighten this back down. This won't be quite properly adjusted, but yeah, when you're looking at it directly behind, you'll be able to see a little bit more of like what the alignment is. The most important thing, the most important adjustment that you'll make with your derailleurs and your drivetrain is going to be this barrel adjuster adjustment. And last class, we talked about barrel adjusters in terms of brakes. So for anyone that was present at last class, you might remember barrel adjusters. For anyone that wasn't, barrel adjusters are a screw. And they control fine-tune adjustments of tension. And it's a little counterintuitive, but loosening a barrel adjuster tightens tension. And it does that because as you're loosening this barrel adjuster, it's moving out this way. And you can imagine it, it's like it's expanding the tension on this housing, which creates more tension overall in the system. So loosening your barrel adjuster tightens tension, and tightening your barrel adjuster loosens tension. This is kind of complicated and will take probably some playing around with in order to figure out. I recommend, especially if you want to start off finding your barrel adjusters on your brakes, and playing around with that barrel adjuster to kind of get a sense of like loosening as tightening and tightening as loosening. It's the same system, they just have different effects. So like I was talking about with your chain moving up and down on the cassette, moving up your cassette requires tension, and coming down your cassette is gravity. So slackness, and slackness combined with gravity. So if you're having trouble, if you're going through and so how I test my shifting is that I pedal, and you'll really need to be off the ground for this. So you'll need to be in a stand. Sometimes you can find like a railing or something that you can hang your bike seat on, but you'll really need to be off the ground so that you're pedaling forward, as opposed to backpedaling, which is what we're doing for cleaning the chain. And then I'm going to pedal, and I'm going to click my shifter one at a time to make sure that each click has a corresponding movement of the chain. So click, it moves, click, it moves. And I'm gonna do that and make sure, is my chain jumping? Is it lagging as I'm going up? Is it lagging as I'm going down? One of the telltale signs of not enough tension in your derailleur is that when it's on the highest gear and you move up one, that you have to click your derailleur, or you have to click your shifter twice in order to get it move up. And that's caused by basically that first click is picking up extra, it's like a ratchet system. So that first click is picking up that extra tension. And then that second click is allowing it's finally tensioned enough to allow it to move. But what that means is you only have so many clicks because your, especially on a road bike, the number of times you can shift matches the number of gears here. So along those lines, the number of gears that you have is the number of chain ring of these like cogs in the back. And that's important actually for buying a chain. If you ever need to buy a chain, even though, so I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 cogs in the back. So I need a 9-speed chain. The number of speeds this bike has overall is multiplied by the number of front chain rings. So I have 9 times 3, this is 27 speed bike, but I need a 9-speed chain. But that means I have 9 clicks. So if I've already used one of my clicks to eat up extra tension, I can only get to 8 of my cogs in the back. And this is really important because your largest cog is your easiest cog. And that means that if you're ever going uphill, your easiest cog is what you want to be in the back and the front. And so it will be really, really, really hard to pedal uphill without being able to reach this largest cog. So if I'm having trouble going up, I want to be adding tension. And to add tension, we are loosening, right? And another easy way to kind of remember this, because it gets kind of hard depending on what position you're looking at the barrel adjuster from, but I'm going to rotate it in the direction that I want the chain to be moving in. So if it's having trouble going up, I'm going to rotate the barrel adjuster towards that. And these are minute adjustments. Usually it's not really that much more than like a quarter turn or something, or just like one little motion. And then I'll go back and check. And let's see, I'm gonna over tighten this. So when I over tightened it, it just skipped a cog. So as opposed to going up 1 cog, it went up 2 cogs. So that's a good sign that it's over tight. That also means that when I'm shifting down from here, that fell down fine. Now I'm shifting down, I can't get to my smallest cog because there's still too much tension. The chain is being held in place by that extra tension. So sometimes what I'll do is I'll even just keep pedaling if I know that I've clicked to the position that it should be in. And I'm gonna turn this, and with a couple more turns, it fell back down to its original, to the position that it should be in. This is a really hard skill to get a hang of. The best thing to do is just to put some time into practicing playing around with your barrel adjuster. You're not gonna mess anything up by just changing the tension of your barrel adjuster. And the more that you do it, the more intuitive it will become. But having this sort of like overall understanding that loosening your barrel adjuster, but tightening tension helps move up, loosening helps it move down. And really just playing around with that and seeing, let's see, I'm gonna over loosen. So let's see. Well, that still worked. Let's try it one more time. Yeah, still worked. All right. So just in the last minute here. That's as loose as it goes. I guess this is started off with a pretty good tension. So I don't think I'm going to be able to get this too loose. Oh, well, yeah, I guess that was a little laggy. So I pressed it, it still moved up, but it took a second. The other thing that might happen if there's not enough tension is that it might not be able to get up to this, or sorry, if it's too loose, it might not be able to, it might work on some cogs, but not the top cog, for example. You might not be able to get all the way up there because you don't have that, like, just that extra tension to get up there. If your barrel adjuster, if you can't get it as loose or as tight as you want, the major adjustment of tension is your pinch bolt. So the pinch bolt is where you'll see this little cable end here. And if you can follow that, there's a point, there's a bolt where your cable, you can see here, is pinched by this bolt and it's held in place there. And you can make more major adjustments with that. But barrel adjusters are really nice because they allow you to make those fine-tune adjustments that will be really necessary for getting your derailleur properly tensioned. If you would like a copy of my presentation, it has sort of like basic, just like basic intro mechanic stuff in general. You can email me. My email is afilson, and that's PHILSON at cambridgema.gov. Yeah, types of flat tires you can get. I can share this. Cool. So here's a little preview. Happy to share this. And for anyone that is still here, I really encourage you to just play around with certain, in mechanics, it's, unless you're forcing things past the point of where they're supposed to be moving, if things move easily, feel free to play around with it. You probably will know if you're going to break something. You'll feel it before you get there. Everything else is just a series of adjustments, which can always be fixed. So feel free, don't worry about breaking your bike. And honestly, I find that that was the thing that helped me learn bike mechanics most, was just giving yourself permission to sort of play around with your bike and not being concerned about breaking it. It'll take a lot of force to break your bike. Does the type of bike matter? Definitely. It's whatever really suit what's comfortable for you. We did have a previous presentation or workshop on buying a bike and different types of bikes. Eventually, I'm hoping that we'll get to post these workshops on our website, at which point you could go and take a look at those. We did a workshop with Mass Bike where they talked about different types of bikes. Yeah, there's commuter bikes, there's road bikes, mountain bikes. It really depends on what you want your body positioning to be and what kind of terrain you're riding on. Road bikes tend to have smaller tires. You tend to be more sort of like leaned over them, whereas a hybrid or a commuter bike or a city bike, you'll be a little more upright. I recommend at least going to a bike shop to try out different types of bikes. All right, I think that is just about all the time we have time for today. Please check out our schedule. We have lots of great upcoming workshops. So thank you all for attending.